This is Chuck Sachs for Indie Opera Podcast, and I'll be talking with the librettist and playwright Deborah Brevoort, whose new opera with composer Mishi Wianko, Murasaki's Moon, is receiving its world premiere on May 17th through 19th in a production commissioned and co-produced by On-Site Opera, Metropolitan Museum of Art, and American Lyric Theater. How are you doing today, Deborah?
I'm doing great, thanks. We're in rehearsal at last.
So, how were you brought onto this project initially?
Well, my understanding is that there was a very short time in which this opera had to be created. It was approved a year ago, and they needed someone who could write fast, and I have unfortunately earned that reputation, and so I think that was one of the reasons. But I'm also a great fan of Japanese theater. I've written a no drama about Elvis Presley, both an American version and a traditional no version with no orchestration. So I as a librettist, I actually have an understanding, a greater understanding than most of Japanese culture and Japanese theater. So I was kind of a natural choice.
And who approached you? Was it American Lyric Theater? Or who?
It was On-Site Opera who went to American Lyric Theater, and they said, "Oh, this is the librettist for you." So I was brought in.
So it was like a shidduch, and you.
Yes.
Jewish, arrangement.
Yeah, it was an arrangement.
Yes.
That's right.
So, and how was your collaboration with Mishi?
Oh, it was wonderful, but it was also very fast because we were contacted last May, and we actually had to conceive and write this opera in less than a year.
Wow.
Usually it takes like 3 years.
Yes, it does. But I imagine the agreement was in place, and the grant money was in place, and they had the idea for this, but not anyone. Was Mishi in place either?
Mishi was in place, yes.
Okay.
And but it was all done very quickly, and they knew, and all they knew was it was going to coincide with the new Genji exhibit at the Met. That they wanted it to be about 55 minutes. They wanted it to be something that teenage girls could come to, as well as older audience members. I was told to write for the sophisticated New York audience, but also that would appeal to teenage girls, because the Tale of Genji is required reading in many New York City schools. So who knew?
Who knew?
And and they wanted it to be about Lady Murasaki, and the Tale of Genji, and that was all. So go figure that out. I was told to figure it out, and then I ordered the Tale of Genji, and much to my surprise, this 1,400-page book arrived in the mail. So heavy, I could hardly pick it up. Fortunately, the diary is only 60 pages long, but I had to have a libretto in 8 weeks, and starting with no ideas at all. So I had to do a deep dive into Tale of Genji, and also all the research behind it, because it's a really complicated book.
I imagine everything else went on the back burner at that point.
It was eat, sleep, dream Genji for 8 weeks.
So what exactly is the story within the opera? Did we just follow Lady Murasaki? What is happening in the opera?
Well, as you can imagine, there are many operas to be found in the Tale of Genji.
Yes.
So we decided to focus on Lady Murasaki and her diary and the writing of the Tale of Genji, because this is one of the great works of world literature, on a par with Homer and Shakespeare, written by a woman 1,000 years ago, who was really bucking conventions to write something on this order. She wrote a book that set in motion all of Japanese culture and that continues to define it to this day. So it's a huge literary masterpiece. And so we decided to focus on her and her journey in embracing her role as a writer as opposed to being a courtesan in court. And her wrestling with personal issues which surface in the Tale of Genji. And
Because if her name ends up there as a character in it.
that's right. Genji ends up marrying Murasaki. And
Who is the niece of one of his empress and former lover and stepmother.
Yes, yes, and I, in one of my drafts I had that involved, but I've taken
Yes.
that out. I just the other limitation I had was do it for two singers. So I'm like, so there's
I'm
hundreds of characters.
Reading the synopsis and going, this is one of those Mexican TV shows. What are they called? You know what I mean.
The telenovela.
Yes, it is so. It's waiting to be a telenovela.
Yes.
Because there's so much in play, in fighting and switching of lovers, or children being sired by other people.
Oh yeah.
It's like
multiple wives, intrigue at court, jealousies. Yes.
Yes. So, how much did the commissioning organizations have in the development of this work? I mean, beyond the time period and everything like that.
You mean in terms of the content?
Yes, the content.
Well, actually, everyone said, please figure it out, do something. So, and they were actually very helpful because my response was help, So the Met was terrific. They put me in touch with the woman the scholar from Harvard who put together the exhibit, and she was very accessible to me.
Right, and this is the whole exhibit that this is paired with about Tale of the Genji and Murasaki.
That's right. It's really about how Genji has been interpreted over 1,000 years, and so this is sort of perfect because this is also an interpretive piece. The opera is, and basically what I found something in the Tale of Genji that I used to organize it, and everyone really liked the idea, and that is, in chapter 2 of the Tale of Genji, Genji and one of his friends are sitting around, and they're talking about women, and they're talking about what is the perfect woman, and they're going through all the qualities that would make a perfect woman. And of course, some of those qualities are that she's loyal to her suitor, that she is a good listener, of course, she's perfect.
Right.
Basically, beautiful, somewhat submissive. All of those, those things that men over the ages have seemed to like in women. And one scholarly work that I read said that Chapter 2 is really a template for the whole work of Genji, which is that all of the traits that Genji and his friend come up with, then all the characters in the book exhibit those traits. And basically, what I wrote was that Murasaki then examines those women for what the perfect woman thing that was put on them, what that did to them. And many of your archetypes from Japanese literature come out of the Tale of Genji. So you have Rokujo, Lady Rokujo, who is sort of the archetype of envy. She becomes very jealous because she's not the only one for Genji, right? And other women become meek, or they become submissive, or they lose confidence, or they become monsters of rage, and so it's my interpretation is that Murasaki was writing a cautionary tale to the women of the court, all of whom were trying to be the perfect woman for a whole lot of reasons, which was their role in that society. But she wrote a penetrating psychological portrait of what happens when women do that. And I thought, this is really contemporary. And this is what I think, what I hope will speak to the young women in the audience who are all concerned with being sort of the perfect woman. And because this is what can happen to you if you put that at the center of your life, as opposed to your true calling, which Murasaki had, and which she ended up following and creating a masterpiece because of.
That's fascinating, and no wonder they have them reading this now, this story.
Yes, it's a controversial book. It's really a Don Juan story.
Yes.
My first proposal was, let's call this Me Too Genji.
Yes, I can tell that from reading the synopsis that, I mean, Genji takes many lovers and she keeps moving on and keeps moving through them. And it's like with little, anything that happens, hardly anything happens to him for it.
Yes, and a lot happens to them. Now,
Right.
that was their role. The courtesan was expected to
Yes.
do that. So, but nonetheless, there was psychological fallout. But also, there was psychological fallout for Genji, that character as well. And Genji is exiled during the course of the novel, and Genji is redeemed because he is much more sensitive than your quote average guy, and he he was a beautiful poet and a musician, and he had as a character he's deeply written with a great deal of psychological truth, and so that was the only way I could really handle this 1,400-page book, by choosing that theme, which meant that I could eliminate a lot, and I just focused on that one idea. I could do that with 2 characters in 50 minutes.
Right, and then it's also it's an on-site work, so it's being done in the Astor Chinese Garden at the Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Yes.
Tell me about this space. I mean, I have pictures in front of me, and
well, this space is incredible, and I wrote this opera with pictures of the entire space because we had to time it. Like there's, I don't know if you can see that there's windows. Originally, I wanted to have scenes behind each of those windows. And I don't know what we're going to be able to do. We got into some issues because all of the elements in this garden are actual artifacts that are thousands of years old. So, you can't be hanging light instruments, and I can't have actors opening the doors.
Yes, and this is why the production is being done during the daytime hours, because also it's covered by a whole huge skylight.
That's right.
So it's all natural lit.
That's right. But, we went through the space, and I was told, okay, you can have somebody sit there. They can't step on that. They can't sit on this. They can't use that window because that thing in front of it is, thousands of years old. And so there are several scenes that were written where, Mishi and I went and paced out the space, and
so this is actually where the commissioning organizations came in and had to help you develop. It's like, this is the space you're in. This is the parts of the space you can actually use to tell your story.
That's right. So, like just to give you an example of one fabulous idea that had to be thrown out because we couldn't touch the artifacts. You have these gorgeous screens here, and so when I only had 2 actors, I thought, how do I communicate that Genji has hundreds of lovers? So I thought, okay, fans. And I'm going to have fans popping out of the screens. All I need is a stagehand. Well, I can't pop fans out of the screen because the screen is, some valuable artifacts. So, I had to take that idea and revamp it so that but that I thought would be a really clever way to show all of his lovers. But anyway,
it's fascinating. I'll make sure they get me a picture of this to include. But now let's talk more. You're originally from from Alaska.
Juneau, Alaska. That's
Alaska.
Right.
And you were one of the original founders of Perseverance Theater Company.
Perseverance. Yep. I was in that original company. I was a producing director and an actor, and I started writing there. And I became a playwright and then left.
To come to New York to study?
I went to Brown University to study with Paula Vogel, and then I came to New York and went to NYU Graduate Musical Theater Writing Program, where I started. It was my no drama about Elvis that made me understand that words could travel further on the wings of music. And so I went and did musical theater, and then I became involved in writing opera through the American Lyric Theater Composer Librettist program. I was in the first cohort that they put together 10 years ago. And I've since sort of come over to opera. I'm going on to opera number 7 now.
Right. But also you are also assistant professor now at NYU. Am I correct, in the musical theater program?
Yes, and I also teach at Columbia University.
And also, you're still strongly part of American Lyric Theater's program.
Yes. I no longer receive training there, but, ALT is really God's gift to writers of new opera, and they have been so wonderful. They commissioned my first opera about Edgar Allan Poe. They provided assistance to Steal a Pencil for me. They provided assistance for this. They're always there to sort of help you develop, and I don't know what we would do without them.
And it's like one of your next ones after this is that you're working on is Albert Nobbs.
That's right, and they helped with that as well. In fact, I'm flying to Fort Worth tomorrow morning because it won the Frontiers competition, and selections will be presented down there at Fort Worth Opera this week.
And it's a sense that's another Me Too kind of opera, it's a very interesting story.
Yes, it is. But I based the opera on the book, not on the movie.
Okay.
I don't feel the movie really worked. The camera could not capture, couldn't go to where the story happens, and that's in her head and in her heart. It's very internal. It's not really a Me Too story. I wouldn't even say that it's been called, a trans. I wouldn't say it's that. It's basically a story about a woman who became orphaned, and she had two options in 1865 Ireland: the poorhouse or the whorehouse, and neither was acceptable. So she put on her father's suit, passed as a man, and lived as a man because it beat the alternative. And after 20 years of living in that way, she doesn't even know who she is. And so that is awakened one night when she meets another woman who is disguised as a man and is married to a woman. And this awakens in her, possibilities that she had never she could never afford to consider. And so it's really about a woman awakening and asking, who am I? It's an identity story.
And we kind of have that story. I guess the woman she meets, who's been living as a man and married a woman, that's on premium cable right now, if I'm correct.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
It's I can't remember the title of it.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful story, and the novel is almost like a classically structured opera, whereas the movie kind of Hollywooded it up a bit, and I didn't use that at all. But the novel has it's a tragic ending.
But also you've worked with one of my other favorite composers, who used to be my vocal coach, David Friedman.
Oh, sure, yes. I wrote a children's an oratorio based on a children's book with him, based on an Alaska story, King Island Christmas. That's right.
And you actually wrote two pieces with him.
That's right.
Though, and both about because I'm correct, one of them is with they're being removed from the island.
Yeah, it's called Goodbye My Island. There's two stories written about King Island, and Goodbye My Island is about the forced relocation of the King Islanders from their island to the mainland of Alaska, which is something that the government did up until the 1960s, when the Supreme Court of the United States stopped the practice because it had the effect of decimating and destroying native cultures in order to send kids off to school. It was for economic reasons. So we wrote that story as well. King Island Christmas has been produced 60 times. We have a fabulous album. Goodbye My Island, we haven't gotten off the ground yet. It's written, but we haven't had it produced yet.
It's kind of really needs to be out there now.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that does. And
thanks.
I wish you luck with the opening in about 2 weeks from now with this.
Yes, May 17th.
And thank you. This has been lovely.
Yeah, thank you.